This story is entitled, "Hey Horse, You're in My Chair." I like to work with young colts, and I had taken a young colt that really was kind of a goofball. He hadn't had much experience around anything other than the farm he was on. Good animal, but really was young, and most animals, humans as well, when they're young can do some goofy things. And so I went in and sat down with my little folding chair like you would take to the ball game, and when you sit down in it, the sides kind of hug you a little bit, and I'm sitting down into the cloth seat of this thing, and I sit down with this colt who's not used to being around people for long periods of time. And I had put in some hay and some grain, and I'd put in some water, and he's all over at the other end of this thing, and he doesn't want anything to do with me. Well, what I want from him is I want him to get used to me. I want him to get familiar with what I'm doing and with humans and my smell and all these things. And so I'm not going to rush him. I'm going to let him come discover me. It's one of my techniques that I like to use with gentling. So I take him in there and rub on him a little bit, let him go. He's over there nibbling on the hay and eating the grain and drinking his water, and everything around him is startling him. And he was kind of dingy about it. Everything was spooking him, and he's running around in circles. And all of a sudden, he ends up sliding around sideways along the fence and knocks over his water trough, which was pretty good size, and he was only about 100 pounds. He knocks it clean over, and it's just gushing water everywhere. He runs to the far end of the corral, and he's panicking, rubbing his butt against the fence, trying to find a way out, looking at it like, it got me, it nearly killed me. I laughed, I got up and walked over, and I showed him what was happening. I showed him what he'd done. I picked it up and I splashed the water a little bit with my hand, did a shh real quick in the water, the way a horse will when they're clearing out a place to drink. And I just showed him it wasn't going to hurt him. And I kind of laughed at him a little bit, and he's working his ears back and forth like, don't touch it, man. It'll get you. It'll get you. And so as I'm standing there, he decides at the other end of the round pen with nothing close to him, where most colts would have stood at the far end and watched, he panics again, runs full tilt around the round pen, and comes up to my chair, and suddenly decides the chair's a booger and the chair's going to get him. He spins around on his heels but slips. And as God is my witness, if you told me this story I wouldn't believe it. He fell as he spins around, backside foremost, posterior first, into my chair the way a human being would sit down in it. Body straight up in the air, back legs straight out, front legs bent slightly, head forward slightly, lands in this chair. And it's a miracle he didn't break this chair. When he lands in this chair, of course, what do the sides do? They come up, bloop, and they grab him on either hip. He screeches like you've never heard a colt screech, panics, goes ballistic, jumps straight up in the air. The chair goes up one way, and my book, which I was reading, goes the other. Now, I've used this technique with 100 horses. I go out there and sit down. They come up. They sniff at me. They run away. They sniff at me. They run away. They approach me again. They touch me. They touch the chair. They touch the book. And pretty soon, I'm old hat. They stand right next to me eating, and I can reach over and scratch them. Love on them, scratch them a little bit like any other horse would scratch them. Play with them, and we'll nuzzle each other, and we begin our bonding relationship. This colt broke every rule I've ever seen in that round pen. It was absolutely hilarious. His panic was full. He knew this thing had him. First the water trough was going to kill him. Now my chair was going to kill him. I'm laughing my head off because he's not been injured. He runs clean across the round pen, spins around, and he's like, I know karate. Don't anybody come any closer. And he's looking around just like, I'll kill the next thing that moves. And I'm laughing, and he's looking at me with his ears pinned back like, hey, quit laughing at me. I walk over and pick up my now poop-smeared book, wipe it off, pick up my chair, dust it off. I sit back down, and he begins to circle, looking at the water trough. He becomes comfortable with the water trough. Then he works his way up to me, but he's looking at me like, dude, you're sitting on the predator that just grabbed me and tried to eat me. And he finally works his way up to it, and he begins to sniff, and he runs away, and he begins to sniff, and he runs away, and then he comes back, and he sniffs and jerks, and then he touches it with his lips and rubs it, gives it a little test bite to see what it's going to do. And then he decides to use it as a scratching post to scratch himself because he decides, oh, I guess it's not going to hurt me after all. But anyway, that is my story. Hey, there's a horse in my chair.